couple things. I'm gonna try to make this video a little bit shorter, and then I think I'm gonna do my best to put a cap on this series about like the red flags in dealing with people, which is that I began one video with that title, and then I had like a little like a series of almost like inspiration that dawned on me that turned it into like almost like a 10-part series about indications in behavior and things that are attendant of very problematic experiences and outcomes that are any of us as human beings, but also as people being artistic and creative, when we're obliged one way or another to come into contact with other people, we can experience any number of these and have any degree of outcome with them. So that's why I had included them in this channel. But the greater purpose of this channel is more for creativity and also like portraying my journey as an artist and as a guitarist. So because of that, I'm gonna do my best to put a cap on this series without spinning the intent or the direction of the channel. Um, but um, uh, there's a lot of resources on similar themes like this that proliferate on YouTube and other places that can be valuable, but they can also be a distraction in themselves and yet another daunting challenge to become engaged and fall into the gravitation of those themes in those elements of life where anything that we put our mind to can become kind of like it can almost become like a black hole, and then we get the more we become interested in it, it can be hard to escape that the gravity of our own engagement with different subjects. And I would say maybe the only way to escape an inward or imploding momentum with different themes that are very maybe heavy or just distracting is to challenge ourselves out of our comfort zone and therefore have different experiences and maybe discover different interests that can put us that we can transition out of these phases that can be very heavy, even though the information might have a bearing on things we have experienced. But I wanted to put a cap on this, but I think there might be some value in this these commentary that I'm offering on these themes. And then I want to put maybe the last of which, and maybe yet also the most profound of which, of something that is very profound, is very subtle, and it is just like probably the heaviest thing that we can experience dealing with another person, and that would be the theme of narrative. Um, I would go so far as to say, like a lot of people have talked about like the suffering of my people. I'm gonna say my people, African American people, as I consider myself a first generation African American, having been born in the United States with African ancestry and white American ancestry, but also having the appearance and the experiences of being a black African American, both with people I love, but then also being antagonized and maybe marginalized to different degrees that I may or may not be aware of, as part of and within that experience of being an African American, and then also finding shelter and support with different African American blessings, whether that be relationships in my life, faith settings, and then just some of the brilliance and the insight that African Americans make available to one another, to the world. I've had a discussion with an eminent scholar in privacy, and we were discussing some of the features of how there's a reciprocity between I think between Africans and African American males. Uniquely, I think all the different human families have profound blessings that are needed by all humans, but then can also be more they can be more developed in one line or heritage. And I think that like for some of us, like as African Americans, and like what has become our influence as it's appreciated on a broad sense, it comes back to a deeper reciprocity in that you can I put in other videos that a lot of our music today, as it's our pop our cultural music, we have like hip hop that is arguably the most influential mode of music. But then other music that is not considered hip hop still shares traces, as does hip hop, going back to funk, R&B, blues, um, gospel, and then before that, folk music. There's a book I'm going to put in the description about the experiences of slaves and the religion of slaves, and it talks about that history of the music forms being reduced to what had been actually folk music, as it was when it was expressed like in the work fields of the slaves, whether authorized or not, and then had went all the way back to Africa before that as folk music. But then even as it was existing in the United States in America, with according to this book, as folk music, it wasn't necessarily what we would consider righteous. It just simply was music about what the slaves were experiencing. And as this scholar and myself were discussing, is that it may have actually been more of a relay system where it's music on the surface, on the front of it, and it's brilliant in that sense. But it's also sharing insight and encoded messages that is like a relay system, not different and maybe not unrelated, as maybe a part of what was known as the Underground Railroad. And then I think that a similar effect took place in South America with like things like, I think it's called like capoeira, which is like it's like a self-defense a style that was curated and developed by people who were slaves and deprived of access and means of self-defense training, obviously because that would skew the power arrangements. But then to this day, that area of South America, like places like Brazil, are some of the most influential in terms of different martial arts forms in self-defense, no less than jiu-jitsu in coming into the UFC. And I'm getting past my background with both that musical statement and that martial arts statement, but just that there's a history of some of the most influential things to this day, whether that be martial arts or music, that comes all the way back to the slaves, and it has to do with the reciprocity and the sharing of experience. That it's more than it's deeper than entertainment or just simple musicality and harmony. It's actually a deeper message encoding, and it's like a survival meme. And I think the author the media personality but also intellectual Judge Joe Brown has talked about human beings at different times coming together and sharing insight into the game trails, where the animals may be moving, where the dangers are, both human and animal, and opportunities the same, and so forth. And so I think that that's the spirit in which I'm saying that I've been blessed and afforded maybe graces and opportunities by being reared within and or around the African American culture in the United States. But what I wanted to say is that within that whole history of what's been called like the oppression of us African Americans, now beyond what's recognized as 400 years, I think certain scholars it has there are some people that say that put a date as being like 1619 to 2019 as being 400 years. But that's still quite arbitrary, obviously. And then there are many credible resources to say that African Americans have been here much longer, and also the challenges and the oppressions of colonialism, imperialism, slavery, capitalism, Jim Crow, segregation. All that is deeper and broader and beyond what can be considered 400 years. But we can at least safely say it's been 400 years of oppression without a sizable or significant change in the basic economic power differential and structure. Notwithstanding the graces that we have been afforded with like things like the civil rights movement and where we are socially and culturally, none of that progress should be mocked or discounted. As there are beautiful experiences in lives, like myself being biracial, Anglo-American and African, my very existence, it may not have been facilitated without the strong the strong contributions and fight of African Americans, no less and up to the civil rights movement, but none of the struggles before that being discounted either. But all I meant to say is that if I were to say that what has been the most detrimental feature of our experience in the United States, and perhaps the actual the core of the oppression, beyond the racism, beyond the marginalization, beyond the violence, beyond the deprivations, beyond the sacrifice, the military sacrifices that were discredited and discounted, the denying of status and dignity in civil society. What has been through all of that is simple maintaining of narrative. I would say that in both a toxic, say a codependent relationship, an abusive relationship, an inequitable relationship, and then personally, but then also collectively as an entire people, the most fundamental feature of that is the maintaining of narrative. We all know hear horror stories coming out of Hollywood. The stories behind the scenes being more egregious than the actual scenes being portrayed on film. As we hear word of mouth, obviously, um, but within that, in the real scope and the real power of Hollywood traditionally, going back to I think there were influential people from like the region of Germany that had migrated to the United States and were off studies or had family ties with some of the people that have coined what we know of as psychology and psychotherapy in the late 19th century. There's a history of this psychotherapy and psychology that I've referenced in other videos as being problematic, but also leading into propaganda around around World War One, where I think that the United States was very hesitant and not inclined to join up into World War One collectively. But then there had been a push and a movement of propaganda and manipulative tactics as both film was proliferating and forming around that time, but then also just culturally, like with pamphlets and socially, to socially engineer an entire nation out of an inclination towards peace into a war gear. And we could maybe say that that war gear has not relented all the way into World War II, and then some of the brutal conflicts that have continued from the World War II period to the current day, as part of that history, not the least of which being attended by propaganda and manipulation as a part of and leading into what became Hollywood, and that so that Hollywood is not different from that history and has been an effective means of maintaining the narrative. And so, if you've ever been like in a really nasty have a really nasty dynamic with another person that is deeply detrimental in your experience, but yet they're hard to transcend and to gain liberty from, whether that be in your personal life or us as a people in the United States well over 400 years now. I would say that the fundamental feature of which would be the narrative. Yes, there's probably a little bit of like there's probably a little bit of um, like training, like where you more of the interaction is abusive and detrimental, but then every once in a while you feed a treat, like kind of like you would a dog, and then so that maintains the relationship, so that it's not just completely abuse, and then so that whether it be whether it be like flattering a person, so a person that's being very nasty with you, every once in a while flattering you in a certain way, you'll notice that flattery is maybe part of an abusive dynamic, but then also just different advantages or treats that come with that deprivation. That might be also similar to our experience in as African Americans, or just as people broadly and generally experiencing the dynamics of imperialism and then its modern expression of maybe like capitalism, is that there's a little bit of treats that come with it. And I think the YouTuber King Noble has said that these treats that we experience in an oppressive system can be equated to the spoils of war. and are a function of the spoils of war and the exploits of the earth generally, and the people of earth generally. Even eminent and affluential people can still be exploited on different levels, and that amounts to different surplus and benefits that are experienced as treats and are very addictive to all of us. But what is within that, and is even more profound than the actual treating, in the punishment in the treating being a very captivating and effective dynamicism, is the maintaining of narrative. Because as we're interacting, I think that our human beings we've always had a profound relationship with narrative. If you anyone who spent time around children or can remember being a child remembers the power of narrative around the way that we form our understanding of life. And much of our experience is maybe formed. We form a narrative about many things, and that narrative might be the core underlying feature of our identity. Is part of that narrative. So if you can manage, manipulate, or commandeer a person's narrative of themselves, and then also of an interaction with that person, you can thereby affect their identity, their confidence, their ability, their agency, their coordination on down the line, and it starts with that narrative. So anyone who you're spending time with, and they seek to, or you can sense that they're on some level they are attempting to steer or to command the narrative. What does our experience mean? Who are we? What really did happen there? What is happening now? And then if and then you bring, so say you have a conflict with someone, right? Like, what can be more serious having a conflict with someone than bringing in an outside party, whether that's like it's like, say, when two people are arguing, right? It's getting hot when we're arguing. But then when we start trying to convince another person of our argument being righteous, it has sublimated to a higher level, and that can be like taking someone down through there to the court. But what it's going to come down to in that situation is the narrative. What is it? So I would say that, like, say, I don't mean to be flippant with this. Say somebody's about to get hung up on a tree about something, right? I've seen it, like in the United States, but then also like I've seen it in other countries in recent times where they're having like impromptu courts, or that have life and death consequences. That's hot right there. When it gets like that, what's it going to come down to? It's going to come down to the narrative. What really happened? Who said what? Who did what? And so when the most deadly of outcomes is about to happen, someone's about to get strung up, someone's about to get stoned, someone's about to get outcast, someone's about to have their livelihood stripped. It's going to be about that narrative. And I would say, maybe I've said in other videos that our experience of one another, our experience as human beings, is really outside of one another and unfathomable to one another, yet it exists in the same reality, in a certain way is parallel. So our experiences actually are one another. I think sometimes, like, I was inspiring some young people recently, and I was saying that when a person is doing music, like something that's part of their story, and then another person can appreciate that story, and they can actually see something in their own experience that had nothing to do with that artist, but yet their experiences resonate with that piece of art on a certain way, that whatever story that artist had and whatever story they had, yet it's entirely different on the source, but it's not unconnected. So all of us, our story really is connected, and there's at least one, two, or three sides of any story, but then at the same sense, there's also one story within that. And then, but the control of what lens we're looking at that from, of all those three, if not more, angles, is malleable, and it can actually affect how that narrative is understood, and then how that narrative goes on to impact and influence our experience of ourselves and relating to other people. So I just wanted to say, I'll probably just tone it down with that, but that I would suggest that the most daunting feature of our experience as African Americans, and then as human beings in relationships and dealing with one another, is the narrative. What is going on in the narrative between us? Some people, I've participated in forums that deal with like style for men. It's about coming into our strength as men. but then no less the things that affect us like relationships and professional settings